Okay, so welcome, friends. Welcome to those who are here with us live and those that will hear this recording another time. I'd like to welcome Coach Tom Smith to the space and invite Tom to introduce himself as he shares with us about flourishing in life and ministry. This is the first session of a two-part presentation. And Tom, we're just so grateful that you are here to share your wisdom and your experience with us.
Thanks, Jill. Really appreciate the opportunity. And I'm passionate about this information because I wish I had had it like 10 years ago when I was serving congregations, because I think it would have avoided some um, uh, conversations that needed to be returned to and healed and mended. And so understanding how the brain works, I think creates a foundation, especially as coaches, for forming questions for our clients. I don't expect anyone to start talking about amygdala and all of these things in a coaching session, but knowing how the brain works, how it processes stress and fear when you're in a session, it can help you ask questions that get to the heart of what the client is up against. And so as a pastor for 20 years, youth minister, and now a full-time coach, I'm really grateful to be here to share some basic brain science information. Just kind of go over um, so I'll go over some of the basic brain science. You may know this already, so it's just a helpful review. That's another way of getting it to stick. I'll talk about fatigue and anxiety. What is it and how we can mitigate it, how we can reduce it. Can't eliminate it, but we can certainly get on top of it so it doesn't block us or prevent us from pursuing our goals. We'll talk a bit about defining what good enough is, and how we can manage expectations in healthy ways. And that will lead us into the next session in November when we talk about developing a definition, a personal definition of success. We'll have time for questions, and then if there's time, a mindfulness exercise that we'll do at the end as a practice that you can do later on your own time. And if you have questions, I know if you're watching this on later, feel free to email me, Tom at ridgeviewcoaching.org. And I shared with Jill at the beginning that I'm more than happy to meet with any of you for a half hour. This isn't a sales pitch or anything. If you've got a specific situation and you want to pick my brain for 30 minutes, send me an email. I'll send you my scheduling link, and I'm happy to have those conversations with fellow coaches. Okay, so brain's number one goal. I used to think it was like helping me become like wealthy, right? No, or famous, a star. No, not that. Our brain doesn't care anything about that. Our brain cares about one thing, and that's survival. And understanding this kind of foundational perspective can begin to maybe help you connect dots with a variety of your thoughts and what is and isn't stressing you. And so the number one tactic that the brain uses to pursue this goal of our survival is energy conservation. 10,000 years ago, our ancestors who were able to manage their energy when food sources were scarce and inconsistent, they were the ones that lived long enough to reproduce. And so that brain that came out of that evolutionary process is the brain we have today, and it's still very concerned about energy conservation. It's like we all have the same brain, and I'm going to set kind of neurodiversity aside for now, but the majority of brains on the planet are the same, and they're basically 10,000 years old. We're still using, that's brain 1.0. We're still using that model. And it's like we have this amazing sports car that gets us safely from place to place. It has phenomenal features that we maybe use 80% of. But not only is our brain amazing, but it's an energy Scrooge. Our brain thinks we're on empty. The gas tank is an eighth filled all the time. And it goes back to that evolutionary process where food was scarce. And so the goal was to keep our hearts pumping, our lungs, working, and so that was the primary way we survived. And people who were able to manage their energy levels lived long enough to reproduce. So, how does our brain achieve its goal of survival and energy conservation? The first thing it does is create habits. So our brain is always monitoring what we're doing and what we're thinking. And so I think of it like this. If you have like an initial thought, there aren't, or an action, a new action, there aren't any neural pathways necessarily connected to that. So it's kind of like being out in a desert. There aren't any roads. It's a new thought, takes a lot of focus, a lot of energy. But as we repeat that thought or repeat that action, our brain takes notice and it starts to connect the neurons that help facilitate that thought or process. So it's like, okay, now we have a dirt road. And if we continue doing that, our brain says, oh, okay, this is really serious. This is something we do all the time. We're going to add to our neural network that helps perform those thoughts or actions until we have an unconscious habit. So one example I'll share, I remember one time in the ministry, I had two funerals on the same day. And I remember driving to church, stopping at a light, and I looked down and I thought to myself, I don't remember getting dressed. I don't know. I'm glad I got dressed, heading to this funeral. But I had all of that stuff in my mind. And so my brain just went on autopilot. And I got dressed, brushed my teeth, did all my morning stuff. And when you have that, it allow your brain kind of saves a ton of energy without having to think, okay, I have, get my shoes. That all becomes automatic and takes a lot less energy. So real quickly, these are neurons. Um, what happens is when we have a thought or we do an action, an electrical impulse goes down the axon, gets to the cell body, and then out of the dendrites, it releases a chemical that goes through this gap between neurons. And then when it reaches an adjoining neuron, it fires the electrical signal and it goes on. And so we have this neural network in our brain that's firing all the time. And so when habits are being created, the brain starts adding myelin. It's like a insulator. And the more myelin that gets added, the faster this process happens. So actually, habits take energy at first, but then the benefit is this myelin will allow future repetitions of that action to happen a lot faster with a lot less energy. And this happens for both desired habits and undesired habits. So the neuroscientists talk about how neurons that fire together wire together. So if you sit down to watch a football game or something and you have a bowl of popcorn, you do that a lot. Maybe when you're watching a football game someday, you're going to, hey, where's my popcorn? It's going to connect. You're going to want to do that. And we can use that knowledge then to create healthy habits as well as how to stop habits that we don't necessarily want to do. So getting back to this then, the thicker myelin, the faster the nerve fires. And so getting back to this imagery, when we're first having a thought or when we're meeting someone new for the first time, our prefrontal cortex, which is an energy hog, is on fire. It's focused. And as we meet that person, as we perform that activity or have that thought, myelin gets added and it becomes automatic. And I've worked with young adults and I observe this when they'll say, I'm just so stupid or I made a dumb mistake. And that thought has become like almost habitual that, I'm not a worthy person. And those thoughts, and I'll get to this in a minute, we can change that. We can rewire it. It doesn't have to be that way all the time. So the idea is to create habits consciously, intentionally. It takes about 66 days of repeated action for our brain to say, okay, this is something we really want to do. And when we stop, when we break a habit, it's not like the neurons associated with that habit disappear. They just are kind of dormant, I'll say. So it's really easy for those to get reignited again. I mean, eventually, over time, they will become less impactful. But I suppose I know myself, you go on a diet, you lose weight, you feel good, but then something happens, and I happen to be a stress eater. I know that, and so bam, the habit returns. And so it takes time and patience and self-compassion to build those healthy, lasting habits. So quick review, and then I'll just pause for a second. Neurons that fire together wire together. Brains create habits unconsciously and consciously to conserve energy, because conserving energy is how the brain meets its number one goal of our survival. And so the key is to make desired habits easier and undesirable habits harder. So I have a whole nother talk on habit formation, and but this is key though when we think about fatigue and stress, because we can change aspects of how we think that impact our fatigue and stress levels. Laddering is a way of reflecting on habits that you're currently doing, like say brushing your teeth. When I brush my teeth, when I'm done, I do 2 or 3 deep knee bends. So I'm trying to connect, a little leg workout, very little, but it's a workout with an existing habit. And so then I just don't even think about it. I brush my teeth, I do a couple deep knee bends, I'm on my way. A blocking mechanism is to stop a habit so you don't bring the ice cream home. You don't buy the Doritos or what have you. You make it harder to do the habits that you want to end. And you become intentional about that. You don't go into a grocery store hungry because you'll overbuy. I mean, you're hungry, right? So you have a habit of eating before you go shopping, whatever. So some coaching implications then is that change requires energy. So when we're talking about helping clients change, transform, pursue their goals, we need to keep in the mind we're asking them to spend energy. We're asking their brains to spend energy to create a new habit. And the motivation to do that has to come from within. That's why I think in coaching, it's not like I'm coming up with action steps, because coaches coming up with, they won't do them. And so one of the core parts of coaching is not being a mentor or consultant. You're inviting the client to come up with these action steps, because it's going to require their intrinsic motivation to implement them. And it also lifts up the importance of good sleep and diet. I was reading an article recently, and it said, we have this fallacy that teenagers are lazy. Well, what we confuse laziness with is really fatigue. They're tired, and so the importance of getting a good night's sleep, which is 8 hours plus or minus 10 minutes. I mean, if we get less than that, we're fooling ourselves. And having a good, healthy diet, making sure we're fueled. And so observing a client's fatigue levels, watching the body language, that all plays into, maybe a follow-up question. Tell me more about that action step. What is that going to look like on your busiest day of the week? Are you going to, how will you be able to get that done? And if they can't, then well, what can you do on your busiest day? Those kinds of questions. Our brain also has a tough time distinguishing between hunger and fatigue. It needs energy somehow. So often, our brain is good at telling us when it's tired. It's not so good at telling us what it needs. But a lot of the times we confuse hunger with fatigue, and instead of taking a nap, we eat something or drink something. And the bigger pieces of this of the energy required to change is that we have a negativity bias. I'm sure you've heard of this. So when we hear something new, our brains immediately have a negative connotation to it. Why? Because it's going to take energy to do that new thing. And so we have to be aware of that kind of predisposition, the brain 1.0, of being leaning towards a negative bias toward new ideas or new action steps, and set those thoughts aside and pursue them. We also, the opposite of that is a familiarity bias. Since we're alive, we're surviving, we like what we're doing now, even if it isn't the most helpful or life-giving. If we're alive, right, that's the goal. Our brain doesn't really care if we have a bunch of friends or anything. Our brain cares if we're alive, then we're going to stick to what's familiar. And so as a coach, then these are major pieces that are going through our client that might invite us to ask more open-ended questions to kind of dig and probe a little bit deeper of what we're asking or what they're asking themselves to change. So before I get into this threat detection, which is survival strategy 2, just want to pause and catch a breath. What I had meant to do is take a couple of deep breaths. So why don't we do that now? I had meant to take a couple deep breaths at the beginning. So why don't we just, I'll invite you to close your eyes and take 3 deep belly breaths right now. So that is a very effective, simple and effective way of recharging our brain. And I'll get to that in a second. So we have energy conservation through habit formation as a survival strategy, and we have now threat detection is another survival strategy.
Hey,
So
Tom,
yes, please,
do
John.
you, do you have time for a question or should we
Yeah,
wait till
yes,
the
please. Oh, no, 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 please.
so
Thank
just
you.
maybe more of a thought, what's interesting to me is you gave me an insight on why our brain chemistry can lead to addictive habits and particularly like relapse
Mm,
because the dormant nature of our neurons, it's easy to kind of fall back into those habits when, not just addiction to substances, but any kind of behavior. And also, the brain chemistry reason why we generally as humans don't like change, and get expressions like the devil,
yep,
it's brain science
yep.
that is kind of leading us to a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not always greener, that kind of absolutely. And
Right.
my wife was in addiction treatment with brain disease clients. And what she saw, to your point, was in order to really enter recovery, they had to remove themselves from all their friendships, from
Wow.
all the connections because it reminded them. She had one client say, I can't use the restroom at the corner of whatever because that just triggers
Mm,
all of what the things that we're talking about. And so for something like that, I mean, that's a major life change. It's going to take a
yeah.
ton of energy, ton of care, ton of support, and
Yeah.
you really appreciate you lifting that up.
And that also puts you in such a vulnerable position to remove yourself from all your normal structures to be so disorienting as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Yeah, thanks. So our amygdala is one of our primary threat detection systems. It's like radar, kind of constantly on the lookout for potential threats, or like a home detection system that is monitoring the doors and windows. I once was working with a client last spring who had high levels of anxiety, and I said to him, it's kind of like you have a home alarm system. And when the cat walks through it, it goes off, and you leap out of bed because the alarm is going off, and you think there's a predator or somebody in, but it's just your cat. And he paused and he looked at me and he said, that happened this morning. My cat walked through our alarm system, it set it off, and I went nuts. I said, so what did you do? He said, well, I had to fine tune the setting. And I said, well, that's what we're doing through this coaching process is fine tuning your threat detection system, because it can become overly sensitive so that basically any thought of concern or worry can set the alarm going. And so we can practice, we can develop a new habit that allows us to kind of put the different threats in their place and respond to, and to choose to respond, or to choose which ones to respond to. So real simply, a the stress response kind of looks like this. We have a stressful situation or thought, real or imagined. Doesn't matter if we're interpreting it as a stress. It gets into our amygdala, kind of the radar, the detection system. And if it determines that that's a significant stress, it will bypass our prefrontal cortex and go right into freeze, flight, or fight mode. And so our prefrontal cortex is where creativity happens and decision making and problem solving. So that gets muted or offline even, because it takes so much energy to run our prefrontal cortex. And our amygdala says, I want that energy, getting our heart pumping, our muscles contracting, because we are going to go to war here in a minute, or we're going to freeze. We're going to. And so the stress response, if we have a stressful situation, someone cuts us off while we're driving, we get a burst of adrenaline, and we have about 90 seconds in order to reframe that stressor. And if we don't reframe it, if we start screaming or whatever we might be doing, then after 90 seconds, our amygdala is going to say, wow, this is a major threat, and it can start to dump cortisol into our system. And that's the major, I'm going to wrestle a bear now kind of response. And cortisol will remain in our system for up to 2 hours. So you could be driving home from work, someone cuts you off. If you allow it to enrage you, when you get home, you're ticked off at the world and your kids and your family, and it's your brain trying to process this survival method of responding to this threat. So how we, and we'll be there in a minute, how we process and create space for us to choose whether, how we're going to respond becomes really key in monitoring stress and anxiety. So I define stress pretty simply. It's the difference between the real or perceived demands placed on us versus the real or perceived resources. So to reduce stress, we need to either reduce the demands or increase the resources. And it's that perceived part that I think there's a lot of room as coaches to help our clients reevaluate, reprogram. And one thing about the resources, the number one resource that we don't take enough advantage of are other people, our colleagues. Instead of pushing through a project, pick up the phone or text someone, hey, you got 10 minutes? I want to run something by you. That process will increase resource, reduce stress. So having this in mind, this image can really be helpful if you're finding yourself in the midst of a stressful situation, or your client is, to kind of slow the process down and say, well, tell me more about what exactly is stressing you. What's the demand being placed on you, and have them articulate that. And just the process of articulating that will lower their stress, because our mind is going off. Our mind is coming up with all sorts of horrible possibilities that are highly unlikely to happen. And this results in fatigue. So in our culture, in our day, we've learned to define success as always hustling, always moving, because there's this false assumption that the more time we spend at something, the more productive we are. But that's really a 19th or 20th century assumption. Before I get there, so, in the 19th, 20th century, you had to be at a place and you used your hands to make stuff. So at the end of the day, you were evaluated on how many widgets you made. But in the 21st century, we use our minds to create and to imagine. And our minds work differently than our hands. And so we don't have to be at our desks. We don't have to be at our computers or whatever to be working because our minds are always on. And we'll share that. So our brain is biological. It needs recharging. It's not a tireless machine. And so the formula for burnout is ignoring that and just go, go, go. And what we can help our clients do, what we can do in our own lives, is to create a new approach for success, which is go, recharge, go, recharge, go, recharge. Recognizing that our brain is always worried about our survival, it's always monitoring our energy, and so it needs rest. And it needs rest throughout the day to really increase a person's productivity and efficiency. So it's kind of like a cell phone battery. It runs out of juice. The more you use it, the less energy you have. So by the end of the day, our brain has a low battery level. We become irritable, hangry, distracted. We don't have any impulse control. We just, get home and, just eat whatever, drink whatever. We're less productive, and we have decision fatigue. We've made all these decisions. Decisions take a lot of energy, and by the end of the day, we simply can't make any more decisions. And so we just go with whatever is placed in front of us. So we can help our clients, and we ourselves can develop a new skill. So it's a skill that we can gain, like any other skill. It takes practice, but we can do this. So everyone's brain begins to, have a low battery signal around 3 to 4 in the afternoon, or about, somewhere between 6 and 10 hours after awaking. So it's usually at that time, and track this coming week, monitor your energy levels and see if there's some consistent pattern where there's a time of day where you just feel like, wow, I got nothing left. And so what we'll do is we'll drink coffee or we'll have a snack, but it isn't that we're hungry, it's that we're tired. Okay. And what we'll often do is because, we have this definition that you got to keep going, instead of acknowledging our fatigue, we keep pushing through. We keep trying to grind out the sermon or whatever the problem is, whatever the challenge is, instead of recognizing that our brain is tapped up. Or worse, we'll go on our phone and we'll watch a TikTok or YouTube or something. But watching those or looking, focusing on our cell phone is also tiring. So it's not helpful to recharge our brain. So our brain doesn't have this like an on-off switch. Rather, our brain is more like a toggle. It switches between executive mode and creative mode. Okay, so it goes back and forth. And it can't do both at the same time. We're either in the executive mode or we're in the creative mode. The executive mode is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex uses 20 to 30% of our daily overall, our whole body's energy. So it's the furnace. It deals with task mode, your decision making, and it drains our mental battery. Whereas the creative mode, we toggle over to that, is the mind wandering mode. It's an extremely productive state of mind. It's where creativity happens. It's where we have those aha moments. We'll see it with our clients. All of a sudden, they'll get to have a different perspective. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. So they switch into this creative mode, and that mode recharges the executive function. It's also where deep problem solving goes. So if you go, let's see, I'll keep going. I'll get back to that thought. So we have these two modes of thinking that one drains the brain and one recharges it. So what are some brain draining activities that we do? Well, decision making. And in our day, we have thousands of decisions to make. It's not like you can just go to the store and buy a toaster. There's like 5,000 toasters to buy, and so all of those things add to our decision making. And I'll get into more of that in our next time. Uh, any kind of stress or worry drains our brain. It's taking a focus and using our prefrontal cortex. One of the things about COVID that I found draining is like all of a sudden I'm having 4 or 5 Zoom meetings a day. Well, part of that is we're managing the impression that we're making on others. It's like, oh, I gotta, let me just straighten up here, right? Well, that is draining your executive function. I mean, I remember like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was like fried, and it's like I've been sitting in this chair the whole day. Why am I so exhausted? Well, we're managing our impression while also, thinking about whatever the uh, um, Zoom was about. Driving in traffic drains our brain. Controlling all our impulses. Multitasking, which is actually a misnomer. We cannot multitask. We think we can, but what we're actually doing is we're switching between tasks very quickly. And every time we do that, we lose efficiency. It takes longer because we're switching back and forth. And that switch drains our executive mode. It drains our brain. And we can talk about, helping clients develop batches, like shut your email off, schedule 3 times a day to review email, and then don't think about it, turn it off. Having our
Yeah.
email on while we're working lowers our IQ. Yeah, John, please.
Yeah, Tom, I do, just thinking for those who might be listening to this as a pastor like I am, I think this is really key because many of us function in offices where we want to and rightfully should have open doors to interruption. As pastors, when we're in our office, we want to be there for people. We want to, that can pop in, but there's a cost to that. And the cost is this kind of interruption, decision making, going to and from tasks. Pastors are, you know, um, wearing so many hats
Mhm.
in such a short period of time. We're speech writers, we're counselors, we're property managers, we're homeless advocates. We do so many things in such a short period of time. I think that's part of the special fatigue of pastors.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things with working with pastors is I help them try to regain control as much as they can of their schedule so that you're present. One of the gifts I had about 5 years into my last call, the church had a cell phone or an email app. I got a new phone and I couldn't reload the app. Turned out to be a blessing because I realized when I got home at 5 o'clock, if I got some email, there's nothing I can really do about an email till the morning anyway, other than lose sleep, which I did a lot of times. So what I let everybody know, you've got my cell number. If someone's going to the hospital, if you need me, I told counsel, you can get me. But if you're going to send me an email, just know I'm not going to get to it till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if it's an urgency, life or death, whatever, call me and I'm here for you. And that freed my mind in the evenings so much. I could be more present with my kids, my wife, and it allowed my executive function to rest because I was constantly, especially if I got a nasty email. We went through the RIC process, so I got a couple of those, and I just it wasn't helpful. I mean, okay, I'm going to lose sleep. That's about all that is going to come out of me reading that kind of an email at 8 o'clock at night. So great point, John. And to help our pastors who are clients consider ways of claiming some control over their schedule. So if they're going to be writing a sermon, stay home or go to a coffee shop or and to focus on it. You'll get it done quicker, more effectively, and you'll have a greater sense of control. Because I think, John, what I hear in that is that kind of what you just mentioned, all of those different tasks, that's just exhausting to hear it, right? And so to slow the process down and help clients evaluate their week, and maybe you can't just like look at emails 3 times a day, but maybe you can do something though. Maybe there's a way to turn on the screen that you get messages from the council president or whoever. But I invite clients, I walk with clients as they help kind of determine how they can batch their work and improve their efficiency, lower their fatigue.
And the new thought for me, Tom, is this would be a way to protect my brain,
Yes,
literally to kind of protect my brain functioning so that I can be a better pastor
that's
in
it.
the times when I am present. It's like that brain conservation.
Absolutely. And I don't have time to go into it this time. Next time, though, I'll talk about that. We schedule activities when we really should be scheduling energy. We should do like an energy audit, like Sunday
Wow,
evening, whatever.
interesting.
Look at your week and schedule those things that are going to take energy from you, and then sandwich around them the things that give you energy. So if you've got a staff issue or you're talking to an irate congregant or whatever it is, you know that's going to take energy. So first, what time of the day are you at your highest level of energy? That would be a time to maybe schedule that meeting if possible. And number two, what are energy restorative or, how can you refuel your brain before and after that those high demand aspects? So go for a walk or doodle or listen to some music, call a friend, whatever it might be, to help restore your brain so you're not just grinding on to the next thing. Energy scheduling. Kids, children, we worry about them. We want to keep them safe. That's on our minds. They're off at school and, we're still thinking about them, and that can drain our brain. Using the cell phone, it requires focus. And so if you're turning to your phone as a way of taking a break, you're not giving your brain a break. It's not the kind of break it needs. So anything that requires attention drains that executive function. So, how do we recharge our brain? Walking, especially walking in nature, has a really powerful way of letting our mind wander. Before I go any further, so one of the ways to access the deep thinking capabilities of the creative mode is that when we're getting ready to transition into a break, if we've been working on something and we find ourselves stuck, we say to ourselves, or we write it down, I am struggling to solve this issue, whatever it is, and you specify it. Then you set it aside, you go for a walk. And that question will go into your subconscious, and your brain is going to be working on it while you're having this lovely walk. And getting back to that, the assumption that we have to be at our desk to be considered working, you're still working on this walk. You're just doing a different activity. That's what I say to my client. It's not like you're taking a break. You're working. But what you're doing is you're doing it in a different way and it's recharging your brain. So you're going to be more effective. You're going to be a more, as you said, John, a more present pastor when you return, hanging out with friends, people you love, listening to music you know and love, playing with kids in a safe place. So you can just forget about needing to keep them safe. And you want to keep them safe. They're going to be safe, but you can just fully engage with them. Any kind of movement, body movement, running, yoga, stretching. I have an alarm on my watch that every 55 minutes it goes off. I stand, I do some stretching, couple of deep knee bends, take some deep breaths, and get back at it. Uh, Naps are huge. I probably should have had this like number one. And I have experimented with this, and it is amazing. You take a 27-minute nap, 7 minutes to fall asleep, and 20 minutes to sleep. And I started doing that around 2:30 or 3. And what I found was when I would wake up, I felt about 90% of the way I felt at the beginning of the day. It restores your brain unlike any other way of doing it. And what it does then is if you're starting at 3 o'clock with the same energy or almost the same energy as you were in the morning, you can finish out the day strong. And then when you get home, you have energy left for your kids, for the people you love, for your hobbies. and you're not just fried. Your family isn't just getting the leftovers then.
Hey,
And so,
Tom,
yes, John.
what advice would you give to, any human in America where our culture says napping at work is inappropriate and, um, you know, taking advantage of your employer?
Yeah.
We're at that level, I think, in America.
We are. I mean, Google and Microsoft used to have napping pods at work. I think they probably have gotten rid of that too, but they used to have that because you have these programmers that are doing this analytical thinking, and they knew that they had to give them a break. They probably also made them work 18 hours a day too. But I think that um, going out to your car, tilting the seat back, closing your eye, whatever. I mean, I would just say companies are being short-sighted and they don't know how their brains work and the brains of their employees work because your
But
employee is going to come back more efficient, more alert, more able to solve problems and be productive. Yeah.
how could a pastor justify this with, their staff or, I'm just thinking on a practical level, how to implement this as a pastor?
Well, I think that uh, communication would be key. But I mean, think about a pastor. I mean, a pastor's like never off. So to say to someone, you could just say, I've got an appointment and go home. Or I know some people, they have like one colleague has like a beanbag chair in the office or in the closet, pulls the beanbag chair out, lays down 27 minutes.
Or a
Uh,
pillow like under your desk?
Under your desk, there you go. But I think that so it would require, I think, John, some experimentation to say, I want to try
Yeah.
this.
You know what I've actually done? I've actually, which isn't entirely false, but feels like a little bit of an edge. I've just gone out and said, I've got a headache. I'm gonna close my eyes for 20 minutes.
Right,
I'll be in there if you have an emergency, because my brain is my brain is hurting.
right. Well, and I think it would be an opportunity for a pastor, maybe at a council meeting to talk about like, I mean, you all have brains too. So, this isn't just about me loafing. It's about me trying to be the best pastor I can be. And how about
Hmm.
you? Don't you want to be the best business person, nurse, doctor, parent, teacher, whatever? This is real stuff. This isn't just a way of getting out of work. It's actually a way of improving efficiency and becoming better at what I do.
Hmm.
You'll more than make up. I guess I would say you will more, I will, I will do more than 27 minutes worth of work when I get back that will more than make up for the time taking a nap because I'm going to be that much more efficient. Doodling is another way. It's just mind wandering. So if you're a doodler, good job. It maybe be more intentional and schedule that, 5 minutes every hour. Anything that lets your mind wander, that's the recharging mode. So how do we go about, kind of some of the things you're talking about, John, is how do we keep our brain at its peak? Well, as an initial goal, kind of a minimal level, start scheduling 5 minutes an hour. And if that's not possible, then do what we did earlier. Take 3 deep belly breaths. Maybe you're in a meeting, you got back-to-back meetings or whatever, and you just, you can't go for a walk. So in the midst of the meeting, you can take 3 deep breaths, I think, without really being, all that noticeable. And that will help. It will help recharge your brain. And I use a timer. There are all sorts of different. My son gave me this. It's a clock that has 10, 25, 5, and 50 minutes on each side. You set it down, it automatically starts counting down. So when I take my breaks, I put it on 5, and it'll buzz after 5 minutes. So I don't have to be thinking or looking at my watch. How long have I been doing this? I just set that aside. It goes off, and off I go. So a question to ask is how much time do you spend today recharging, and what might be a good goal for you to strive for that you think you could achieve in the coming week? And neuroscientists say the ideal amount is 20 to 25% of your day in recharge mode. So if you're awake 16 hours a day, you're looking at like 4 hours a day to recharge, not all at once, but to create these breaks throughout your day to keep the energy as high as possible. So want to talk about managing unhealthy stress and the worry habit. I'm cognizant of the time we have. There is healthy stress, and I have other talks about that, but today we're going to focus on the worrying. It's a brain draining activity. So remember, we talked about the threat detection. So our amygdala is always looking out for threats, and our brain is a predicting machine. We remember past experiences and thoughts, memories. We apply them to our present situation, and we try to forecast the future. So if we've given a talk in high school and people laughed at us, that's in our memory. And now I'm giving a talk, so oh my gosh, this could be humiliating, right? But the thing is, and tongue in cheek, our brain isn't as good of a predictor as it thinks it is. And that's where we get a lot of stress. Our brains think, oh, I'm going to go to this party. No one's going to talk to me. It's going to be horrible, whatever it is. But it isn't that bad. It's just your brain kind of, back on the plains, worried about saber-toothed tigers and things. It isn't that big of an issue a lot of the time. And I know in the current political environment, my brain can see a lot of saber-toothed tigers coming. And I have to slow down and say, get back into the moment, think about things that I can do and do them, because spending time spinning my wheels isn't helpful. And that's where we go to next. So that any threat is bad, regardless of the likelihood of its happening. Our brain doesn't say, well, I've got, a 5% chance of being humiliated tomorrow or whatever. It's always like 99% chance. If you knew your child would get hurt 1 out of 100 times playing in the front yard, how many times would you let your child play in the front yard? Probably none. And that's how our brain responds to threats. If it's a threat, it's bad. If it's a potential for danger, it's bad. And so we create this anxiety, and it triggers what I call the worry habit or the exhaustion loop. We have a trigger, a thought, a real or perceived task. We interpret it as having too many demands placed on us, and we don't have enough resources. So what do? Well, we worry. And I wondered, well, what's the benefit of worrying? Why was that evolutionarily beneficial? Well, it fools our brains into thinking we're taking action on a future event. So yesterday, I found myself doing this. I want this presentation to be as helpful as possible. And I started thinking, well, what if the PowerPoint doesn't, just all this stuff. And I've caught myself to say, look, worrying about what might happen isn't helping you now. So focus on having clear slide, this kind of helping, try to keep the information concise so that, so that it doesn't go back into this ending loop of worry. And that's what happens when we just get caught and it becomes the potential threats become bigger and more serious. And that's when our prefrontal cortex goes offline. We do an adrenaline or cortisol dump. Instead of sleeping well the night before a big talk, we are restless and we stay up. It's not helpful. Some stress is helpful, having things ready to go, but beyond that, it isn't helpful. Heart rate spikes. I mean, having this kind of cortisol dump leads to high blood pressure, leads to diabetes. It's not meant to be a way of living, which I know a lot of pastors are. I've been there and I've coached and walked with pastors and colleagues, and some of the situations are just extremely, extremely difficult. And so how can we empower pastors to take as much control as they're able to take and kind of reclaim their thoughts? So we can make resilience deposits that will help us handle stress, increase our capacity to handle stress so that our blood pressure isn't spiking and that we can flourish. We can have a deeper experience of life. So self-care, self-compassion is huge. It isn't only about the moment, but it starts to fill up this resilience bank account. So going for a walk is helpful in the moment, but it also has a lingering effect throughout the day. Meditating, talking with friends, and this is a really big one, changing that inner dialogue to one of a best friend. I mean, we're the best friend that we can be, we have. So make that inner dialogue something that's helpful, something that's positive. You know, it's you're doing your best. All right. Maybe it didn't come out okay, but you know what? You learned a lot. What can you learn? That kind of language, that self-compassion. And then taking rest, naps. I'm a big nap guy. So how to break this cycle then is when we first have to become aware that we're caught in this worry loop. And then that awareness allows us to go for a walk, and that activity will burn off the adrenaline. Our brain will say, okay, so there was a threat, and now I'm getting rid of the energy, the muscles are being used, and so you will reduce your stress by burning that stuff off. Talking with friends, meditating will break the cycle. So another way of adding to this or increasing your capacity to handle stress is to reframe the threat to a challenge. So when we tell ourselves, I don't have enough time, you catch yourself and say, you know what? I have the time I need. I can get it done. And whatever time I have, I'm gonna use it, and it's gonna be okay. And whatever happens, it's gonna happen. But I've got the time I need. I'm anxious becomes I'm excited. Our physiological response to anxiety and excitement are the same. If you're heading up to get in line to the roller coaster, are you afraid or are you excited? I mean, we respond the same way. So let's tell ourselves that. And I'm not anxious about this talk. I'm excited about it. It changes um, the sense about the event, and it allows us to handle greater degrees of stress. Dangers and threats become challenges. Okay. And then a very practical approach is to develop a positive inner dialogue that goes something like this. I'm the type of person who, and you fill in the blank. I'm the type of person who is able to effectively use the time I have. And you're telling your brain this. So relax, brain, I've got all the time I need. Right? I'm the type of person who, when I'm confronted by a challenge, I check my resources, I call my friends, but I persevere. I don't become afraid of challenges. I'm the kind of person who perseveres through challenges. Okay, so that is one way of increasing capacity to handle stress. And then take stock of resources. I've mentioned this before. When we're stressed, we can't think of the resources because our prefrontal cortex is muted. So make a note, stick it on your terminal. It says, stress, call my friend Joe or whatever, reach out to people, remind yourself of the resources that you have, renegotiate, like I was mentioning earlier, how you relate to time. And it's also helpful at the end of the day to write down the tasks that are on your mind. Writing it down gets it out of the part of your brain that has this open loop for unfinished tasks that you will later worry about right before you go to bed. But by writing it down, your brain's like, okay, got it taken care of. And in the morning, you can come back and you've got it, and you can re-engage. Got a couple minutes left. Our superpower is neuroplasticity. We can change how we think. The neural network that we have that has led us to stressful thinking, we can rewire that. We can change. So mindfulness is key. Got a couple minutes. So when we have that stressful situation and our amygdala starts to become alert, what mindfulness does, what practicing meditation does, is it creates a buffer. It keeps our prefrontal cortex online. And now we can choose. Is this a threat that I need to take, severe action? Or is it something that I need creativity and problem solving to address? But that pause becomes huge in how we manage stress. So it's kind of like I think of it like fusion. It's brain 1.0. We respond to every thought. We have a thought, we become afraid, we become nervous. There's no space between our thoughts, no choice. But brain 2.0, we create space. So when we have a thought, let's say we're afraid or I've got too much to do or whatever, we can have a pause to say, really, is this thought of screwing up or whatever, is that really helpful? And if it isn't, then I'm not going to believe it. We don't have to believe everything we think. And so I envision putting those kind of unhelpful thoughts on a leaf, and I envision it floating down. I put it in a river and I let it float away. Some people, some scholars talk about, pinning it on a clothesline. You don't need it. It's not helpful. But you get to choose. And I think that just knowing that is empowering. So if a pastor is just spiraling, say, I want to empower you that you can practice disengaging from those thoughts and choosing a more healthy response. And we can create the neural pathways to do that because of neuroplasticity. And I was sharing briefly with Jill, and I know we're getting close to time, but this leads us into my next talk in November. One of the things about reducing stress is discovering for ourselves what's good enough. 30 years ago, adults over 30, studies showed adults over 30 were happier than adults under 30. But it's reversed today. And part of what has happened is because of the internet and we have connections to the globe, young people today are being told that they can be millionaires. You can be a famous YouTuber, TikTok, whatever. The world is, you're going to be a millionaire. Everything is possible. And so they're happy, they're excited. But by the time they're 30, they have $100,000 in student loan debt. They have a job at Starbucks. They're feeling like they got gypped and excuse the language, they're pissed off. I mean, literally, they're angry because they've done what is right and they did their YouTube channel and they had like 9 followers. Why? And so they're angry and they're unhappy. Whereas before, after 30, you were kind of settled. You had a job, a career, maybe a family, and you were more happy than someone in their 20s who was still trying to figure things out. So discovering what's good enough. The problem is the modern era sets standards of success that are absurd. They're not just difficult to reach, they're impossible. Back in the day when we lived in a small town and we didn't know what was going on all over the world, we could be the star quarterback. We could think, hey, I'm the best quarterback in the world, or math, or whatever it is, musician. But today we know, who are the great, 19-year-old mathematicians on the planet. So there's always someone better, and it can leave us feeling like we're just not good enough. We'll never be good enough, and that's the problem. So what's good enough? Well, we love having choices. We love all the possibilities that the internet offers, and we hate making choices because making decisions is exhausting. And it also means we're losing possibilities. We're closing doors. So our mind thinks, oh, I don't want to regret anything. So what we have to do, and I'm almost done, we think about maximizing decisions versus satisficing. Maximizing is when we spend hours on Amazon trying to buy a pair of socks or whatever, We want to get the best pair of socks. And maybe you end up getting the best pair of socks. But if you get the best pair of socks, you're going to be satisfied because, yeah, I got the best pair. You're never going to be like excited because you got what you were looking for. But you can be disappointed because you had all the opportunities in the world and you chose wrong. And that's why seeking the best all the time wears us out. And actually, satisficing, where you think about what you need and you pick the first thing that fulfills that need, It takes less energy. It opens you up for surprise. It meets your need. And ultimately, over the long haul, actually maximizes your time and your energy. And so practicing putting limits on ourselves when it comes to making these kinds of decisions is a way of managing stress, and it's a way of managing regret. So next time on we've scheduled for November 13th, Taming the Chaos Dragging, how we can flourish in the times of transition and change. And part of that is a tool of creating a personal definition of success. We love making choices, or we love choices, hate making decisions. And what happens is every moment is a decision, because now that we have our cell phone, work can connect us at all times. So I'm always deciding, do I play with my kids? Do I listen to my spouse? Do I work? And that wears us out. So we'll be talking about, we'll go into more depth about energy scheduling and batching and all those things we mentioned today. And so, yeah, tech has increased choices dramatically, both bad and good. So, Jill, I know I'm over time. I think there are a lot of different ways to develop the pause, the mindfulness exercises. I would encourage people to explore that. I'll just say my simple exercise would have been inviting, set a timer for 5 minutes and close your eyes and count your breaths. Inhale, exhale, 1, 2, up to 10, and repeat that. And every time you find your mind, going to 20 or thinking about what you have to do, gently remind yourself you're counting to 10 and return to it. And it's that practice of becoming aware that you're not counting to 10 anymore and you're bringing your mind back. That is what gives you the control over your thoughts. And so you can practice that so that when you do have a stressful thought, now there's that diffusion and it kind of like metacognition where you can look at your thoughts and say, you know what, I don't want that one, I want that one. And that's the benefit of developing mindfulness through different meditation. So just real quickly, these bibliography, I'll put it on the screen so later you can freeze the screen and pick those up. Barking Up the Wrong Trees, amazing. I mean, they're all just like I couldn't read them fast enough because they all touched on challenges that I was facing in my own life and offering solutions. So it isn't just brain science for the sake of brain science. It's having direct application to improving people's lives. So you're the expert of your life. I believe in you. And like I mentioned earlier, if you want to reach out, Tom at ridgeviewcoaching.org, we can set up a time and happy to have more conversation. So sorry I went over, Jill.
No apologies necessary. We are so grateful for your time, your wisdom, your experience and expertise. And friends who are watching this recording, if you are a coach, I encourage you to rewatch this and think at every step of Tom's presentation, how might this show up at the coaching table for me? What are questions that I could be asking that would help the person that I am journeying with think about these things and break free of the worry loop? Just so much more that we could dive into. And friends, I also want to name that Tom and I went around and around about how long to plan for this presentation. And we landed on 60 minutes because we know that it's hard for people to commit to something over that in the state of our society today. And ironically, everything that Tom was talking about points back to that, how overstuffed our schedules are. So Tom, again, thank you so much. I know I'm going to listen to this again and again and pull pieces out and work on that and incorporate it into my own life. If nothing else, friends, you've just been given professional permission to take a nap during the day.
Here you
I
go.
mean, right?
Doctor's orders.
There it is. There it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and look forward to seeing everyone back in the space next time, November 13th, again, 4 to 5 p.m. Central. Thank you, Tom, so much.
Thanks.